Story disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The content includes dark themes, horror elements, and fictional depictions of rituals and sacrifices that are purely imaginative and not reflective of any real-life practices or beliefs. Viewer discretion is advised. This video is not suitable for younger audiences, and parental guidance is recommended. The story does not endorse or promote any harmful behavior, violence, or dangerous activities. Please note that all characters, events, and settings are entirely fictional and created for the purpose of storytelling. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events, is purely coincidental. In this episode, Kamau's journey becomes darker and more perilous as he ventures into the haunted Valley of the Shadows, uncovering the terrifying power that binds him. With each step deeper into the valley, he faces chilling apparitions, an ominous guardian, and twisted visions that blur the line between reality and illusion. The city he encounters pulses with a sinister heartbeat, challenging his will and sanity as he confronts an ancient, imprisoned creature that tempts him with forbidden power. Kamau battles inner turmoil and shadowy forces that seem inescapable, each choice pulling him further into a web of dark revelations and impossible decisions. Can he resist the seduction of darkness, or will he become the vessel of an ancient evil? The real struggle for survival, and for his very soul, has only just begun. Kamau's scream was swallowed by the thick darkness as the tendrils of shadow wrapped tighter around him. His chest heaved, his breath short and rapid. The shadows were cold, bone-chillingly cold, as if they were siphoning the very life out of him. He could feel them seeping into his skin, pulling him deeper into the valley's sinister embrace. The woman's haunting smile remained fixed, her glowing eyes tracking his every move. "The valley has chosen you, Kamau," she whispered. "You cannot resist it." Kamau thrashed against the shadowy tendrils, but they only tightened their grip, their coldness intensifying with each futile struggle. Panic coursed through him as his strength ebbed away. The whispers grew louder in his mind, swirling around him, their words indecipherable but filled with a promise of eternal torment. In that moment, Kamau felt something else, a pull deep inside, like a tether to a force he hadn't tapped into before. The mark on his forehead blazed with heat, pushing back against the suffocating darkness. Instinctively, he closed his eyes and focused on the burning sensation. He wasn't sure how, but he reached out to it, drawing power from the pain, from the terror that had gripped him. The shadows hissed and recoiled, their grip loosening for a brief moment. Kamau gasped for air, the icy tendrils slipping from his body as he summoned the strength to break free. He collapsed to his knees, his breath ragged, but the valley didn't let him go. "It wasn't over. You think you can fight it?" The woman's voice was mocking now, her glowing eyes narrowing. "No one escapes the valley, Kamau. Not even you." Kamau rose shakily to his feet, his body trembling. "I'll find a way," he spat through gritted teeth. The woman's form began to shift, her body elongating and twisting into something grotesque, something no longer human. Her face distorted, her smile turning into a wide, gaping maw. Shadows swirled around her like a storm, and she lunged toward him. Without thinking, Kamau reached up and pressed his hand to the mark on his forehead. A wave of energy surged through him, sending a shockwave out into the air. The woman, or whatever she had become, was blasted backward, her form dissolving into the mist as she shrieked in fury. But even as the darkness retreated, Kamau knew it wasn't gone for good. The valley had tested him, and it had left its mark. He wasn't free yet. Panting, Kamau looked around, searching for any sign of an exit. But the valley stretched endlessly in every direction, the mist thicker now, the shadows lurking just beyond his vision. He was trapped in a place that didn't want to let him go. He had no choice but to move forward, deeper into the heart of the valley. Every step felt heavier than the last, his body weighed down by the oppressive atmosphere. But Kamau knew he couldn't stop. The valley was alive, and it was watching him. Ahead, through the fog, Kamau spotted a faint glow. It flickered in the distance like a dying flame. With no other option, he followed it, hoping it might lead him out, or at least offer some clue about how to escape the curse that bound him to this forsaken place. Kamau trudged through the thick fog, every step feeling like a battle against the unseen forces of the valley. His legs ached, his lungs burned, and the mark on his forehead pulsed with an unsettling heat. But the flickering glow ahead kept him moving, pulling him toward it like a beacon in the endless darkness. As he drew closer, the fog began to lift, revealing a large stone altar in the center of a clearing. On the altar sat a small, flickering flame, its light casting eerie shadows across the ground. The flame was unnaturally bright, its color shifting between deep crimson and a sickly green. Kamau felt an overwhelming sense of dread as he approached, but something else, an inexplicable compulsion, pushed him forward. Standing beside the altar was a figure, cloaked in a robe that shimmered like the surface of dark water. The figure's face was obscured by a hood, but Kamau could feel its eyes on him, watching his every move. "Who are you?" Kamau asked, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound brave. The figure didn't respond immediately. Instead, it raised a skeletal hand and pointed to the flame. "The flame holds the answer to your curse," the figure rasped, its voice hollow and echoing as if spoken from a great distance. Kamau's eyes flicked toward the flickering light. The heat from the mark on his forehead grew more intense, almost unbearable, as he stared into the flame. He could feel it calling to him, promising him the freedom he sought. But something felt wrong, terribly wrong. "What do I have to do?" Kamau asked wearily. The figure's hood shifted slightly, and Kamau caught a glimpse of something horrifying. Its face was a patchwork of decayed flesh, its eyes hollow and empty, glowing faintly with the same eerie light as the flame. "You must take the flame," the figure said, its voice like the rustle of dead leaves. "But be warned, mortal. The flame consumes all who are not worthy." Kamau hesitated, his hand hovering over the fire. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the clearing, causing the flame to flare up violently. The shadows around the altar seemed to come alive, writhing and twisting as if eager to claim him. "This is a trap," Kamau thought, his heart racing. But he had come too far to turn back now. With a deep breath, Kamau reached out and grasped the flame. Pain shot through his arm as the fire seared his skin, but he refused to let go. He could feel the power surging through him, a force so ancient and dark that it threatened to overwhelm him. His vision blurred, and for a moment he thought he would be consumed by it. But then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pain subsided. Kamau opened his eyes to find the flame burning steadily in his hand. He had passed the test, or so it seemed. The figure beside the altar lowered its head. "You may have survived this trial, but the darkness within you grows. Beware, Kamau. The valley is not done with you yet." Kamau clenched his fist around the flame, his resolve hardening. He had come this far, and he wasn't going to stop now. But deep down, he knew the figure was right. The darkness was still there, lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for its moment to strike. And the valley wasn't finished with him yet. Kamau stared at the flame in his hand, its glow pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat. He felt a surge of raw energy coursing through his veins, stronger than anything he had ever experienced. The mark on his forehead blazed in response, its heat no longer painful but strangely empowering. He had passed the trial, but the sense of foreboding that lingered in the air told him that this victory came at a cost. The figure beside the altar remained still, its decayed face now turned toward Kamau in silent observation. For a brief moment, Kamau considered asking it what lay ahead, but something deep within him warned that whatever answers it might provide would only lead to more questions he wasn't sure he was ready to face. Before he could say anything, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. The clearing around him shifted, and the once stable earth gave way, revealing a deep chasm that split the valley floor. Kamau staggered backward, barely avoiding being swallowed by the abyss that now yawned open before him. The figure pointed toward the chasm, its voice rasping like wind through dry bones. "The path to your freedom lies beyond. But every step you take will bring you closer to the darkness." Kamau's gaze shifted from the figure to the chasm, where a narrow stone bridge stretched out into the distance, suspended over a seemingly bottomless pit. The bridge was old and crumbling, the stones slick with an unearthly mist. Crossing it would be perilous, but there was no other way forward. His hand tightened around the flame, its warmth giving him a small measure of comfort as he stepped toward the bridge. With each step, the ground beneath him seemed to shift and twist, making it difficult to maintain his balance. But Kamau pressed on, his eyes focused on the other side. As he reached the middle of the bridge, a chilling breeze swept through the valley, carrying with it a low, guttural growl. Kamau froze, his heart pounding in his chest. The shadows around him began to shift, forming into twisted, animal-like shapes. Their glowing eyes gleamed with hunger as they circled him, their bodies made of the same dark mist that pervaded the valley. Kamau's breath caught in his throat as the first of the shadow creatures lunged at him, its fangs bared. He barely managed to dodge the attack, the creature's teeth snapping just inches from his face. Another shadow beast followed, swiping at him with long, clawed limbs. Kamau stumbled, nearly losing his footing on the precarious bridge. In desperation, he thrust the flame toward the creatures. The fire flared, casting a bright light that seemed to burn away the mist, forcing the shadow creatures to retreat momentarily. But Kamau knew it wouldn't be enough. The flame was powerful, but it couldn't fend off the darkness forever. Suddenly, a shrill scream pierced the air, echoing across the valley. Kamau whipped his head around, his heart sinking as he recognized the voice. It was his mother's. "Kamau, help me." Her voice was filled with terror, the kind that clawed at his very soul. Without thinking, Kamau turned and sprinted toward the other side of the bridge. His mind raced, desperate to reach her. But as he neared the end of the bridge, he realized something wasn't right. The scream was too perfect, too deliberate. His mother had been gone for years, claimed by the sickness that had ravaged his village. The valley was playing tricks on him, preying on his deepest fears and memories. Kamau skidded to a halt, his heart pounding in his chest. The scream echoed again, this time sounding more distant, but the shadows around him began to close in. He was trapped between his past and the encroaching darkness. "Fight it, Kamau," he whispered to himself, trying to steady his breath. He clutched the flame tightly, its light flickering in his hand. "This is not real." The scream faded, replaced by a deafening silence. The shadows hesitated, their forms shifting uncertainly. Kamau took a deep breath and stepped off the bridge, his feet landing on solid ground once again. But as he looked around, he realized that the valley had changed. The landscape was no longer the barren wasteland he had known. Instead, he found himself standing in the middle of a ruined city, its buildings crumbling and overtaken by the dark mist. The air was thick with decay, and the sky above was a swirling vortex of black clouds. In the distance, Kamau saw a figure standing atop the highest building, cloaked in the same dark mist that surrounded the valley. It was watching him, its presence ominous and oppressive. Kamau knew this was no longer just about surviving. He had crossed into the heart of the valley, where the darkness ruled. And now, the real battle was about to begin. Kamau stood frozen in the desolate city, the cold mist clinging to his skin like a suffocating blanket. Every breath he took felt heavy, the air thick with the stench of decay. The city felt alive in the worst way, as if its crumbling buildings and streets were part of something far more sinister, something that pulsed with the heartbeat of the valley itself. The figure on the rooftop remained still, watching him with an intensity that made Kamau's skin crawl. It didn't move, but Kamau could feel its presence pressing down on him, a dark weight that threatened to crush his resolve. He couldn't stay here. He had to move forward, to find some way out of this nightmare. But as he took his first step, the ground beneath him began to tremble once more. The cobblestone street cracked open, and from the fissures emerged twisted vines, their thorns dripping with a strange black liquid. Kamau jumped back as the vines lashed out at him, their thorns cutting through the air like whips. One of the vines grazed his arm, and a sharp, burning pain shot through him. He looked down to see the black liquid seeping into his skin, spreading like ink through his veins. The mark on his forehead flared again, and Kamau dropped to his knees, clutching his head in agony. The pain was unbearable, but beneath it, he could feel something else, a voice, whispering in the darkest corners of his mind. "Embrace the darkness, Kamau. It is the only way to survive." Kamau fought the urge to scream as the dark liquid coursed through his veins, the voice in his mind growing louder, more insistent. The vines twisted and writhed around him, but they did not attack. It was as if they were waiting, sensing his inner turmoil, feeding on his hesitation. He tried to shake the whispers from his head, but they clung to him like the mist around the city. "Embrace the darkness," the voice repeated, growing stronger with each passing second. "Give in, Kamau. You are not strong enough to fight it." Clutching the flame in his hand, Kamau felt its warmth flicker, struggling against the encroaching cold that was seeping into his soul. He couldn't let the darkness win. He had come too far, fought too hard to be consumed by the very thing he had set out to defeat. With a surge of willpower, Kamau forced himself to stand. He gripped the flame tighter, willing it to grow brighter. The vines recoiled slightly, as if wary of the light, but they did not retreat entirely. "Enough!" Kamau shouted, his voice echoing through the empty streets. "You won't control me." The dark figure on the rooftop tilted its head, as if intrigued by Kamau's defiance. Then, with a slow, deliberate motion, it raised its hand. From the shadows, more vines emerged, twisting through the cracked streets, their thorns gleaming in the dim light. Kamau's heart pounded in his chest as the vines closed in on him, moving faster now, their intentions clear. He had to act fast, or they would consume him completely. In a moment of clarity, Kamau thrust the flame toward the nearest vine. The fire flared to life, burning with a fierce intensity that startled even him. The vine hissed as it shriveled away from the light, its black liquid boiling and evaporating in the heat. The other vines hesitated, but only for a moment. Then, as if in response to some silent command, they lunged at Kamau all at once. Kamau ducked and rolled, narrowly avoiding the first attack. His mind raced as he searched for a way out. There was no escape, no path forward. The city was alive, and it wanted to devour him whole. But Kamau wasn't ready to give up. "Think, Kamau. Think," he muttered to himself, dodging another vine. The flame was his only weapon, but it was dwindling, growing weaker with each strike. He needed to find something, anything, that could turn the tide. His eyes scanned the street, searching for a sign, a clue. And then he saw it, a symbol carved into the side of a nearby building, barely visible beneath the layers of grime and decay. It was the same symbol that had appeared on his forehead, glowing faintly now in response to his presence. Without thinking, Kamau sprinted toward the building, dodging vines as they lashed out at him. He reached the wall and pressed his hand against the symbol. Immediately, the mark on his forehead blazed to life, and the building rumbled beneath his touch. The vines recoiled, shrieking in pain as the light from the symbol spread across the street, burning away the darkness. Kamau felt a surge of energy, stronger than before. The flame in his hand flared up again, and the vines retreated into the shadows, defeated for now. But Kamau knew this victory was only temporary. The darkness wasn't gone, it was merely waiting, biding its time. He turned to look at the figure on the rooftop, but it was gone, vanished into the mist. The city fell silent once more, but Kamau could still feel the dark presence lingering, watching. The whispers had faded, but they hadn't disappeared completely. As Kamau pressed on through the desolate streets of the ruined city, he could feel the weight of every step dragging him down. His legs were heavy with exhaustion, his mind clouded by the lingering darkness. But he couldn't stop. Not now. The mark on his forehead continued to pulse with energy, guiding him toward a large, looming structure in the distance, a towering building made of black stone, its surface cracked and covered in ancient ruins. This was the heart of the city, the source of its power. Kamau could feel it calling to him, pulling him closer. As he approached, the doors of the building creaked open with an eerie groan, as though they had been waiting for him all along. Kamau hesitated, his hand tightening around the flame. He could sense the darkness behind those doors, an ancient and terrible force that had been slumbering for centuries. But he had no choice. This was the path the valley had set for him. And if he wanted to survive, he had to face whatever waited inside. Steeling himself, Kamau stepped through the doorway. Inside, the air was thick and stifling, the walls lined with strange symbols that seemed to writhe and twist as he passed. At the far end of the room, a massive door loomed, twice the height of a man, made of dark wood reinforced with iron. This was the forbidden door, the one the legends had warned about. Behind it lay the source of the valley's power, the heart of the darkness that had consumed the city. Kamau approached cautiously, the flame in his hand flickering weakly in the oppressive air. As he reached for the door, the symbols on the walls began to glow with a sickly green light. The air crackled with energy, and Kamau felt a sudden surge of fear. This door wasn't just a barrier, it was a prison. Whatever lay behind it was meant to be contained, sealed away forever. But now it was calling to him. His hand hovered over the door's handle, trembling with hesitation. He could feel the darkness pulsing behind it, an ancient force that promised power, but at a terrible price. And then, before he could make a decision, the door swung open on its own. Kamau's breath hitched as the door creaked open, revealing a dark chamber beyond. The air inside was cold, and the smell of rot clung to every surface. The walls were lined with chains, each one rusted and worn, as if something had once been held captive here. In the center of the room stood an altar, but it was unlike any altar Kamau had ever seen. It was made of stone, etched with more of the strange symbols that covered the city. And on it lay a creature, bound in chains, its body contorted and twisted in ways that defied nature. Kamau stepped closer, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature's eyes were closed, its chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its body was covered in black markings that seemed to pulse in time with Kamau's heartbeat. As he approached, the creature stared. Its eyes snapped open, then Kamau felt a jolt of terror. The creature's eyes were pure black, endless voids that seemed to swallow the light around them. You've come, the creature rasped, its voice like nails scraping across stone. I've waited so long. Kamau took a step back, his grip on the flame tightening. What are you? He demanded, his voice shaking. The creature smiled, revealing rows of jagged teeth. I am the heart of this city, it said, its voice dripping with malice. I am the darkness that has been waiting for you. Kamau's blood ran cold. Kamau stood frozen, staring into the void of the creature's eyes. The weight of its words hit him like a hammer. This was the very thing that had corrupted the city, the source of all the chaos and destruction. I can feel your fear, Kamau, the creature hissed, its twisted form rattling against the chains. But do not be afraid, not yet. Kamau swallowed hard, his mind racing. His flame flickered, growing dimmer as the darkness in the room seemed to close in around him. He had to keep it alive, had to stay grounded. But this creature was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It wasn't just a force of nature, it was a living embodiment of evil. You have a choice, the creature continued, its voice slithering into Kamau's thoughts like a parasite. You can leave now, return to your world, and forget everything you've seen. Or It paused, and the chains rattled ominously. Or you can release me from this prison and claim a power beyond your wildest dreams. Kamau's heart pounded in his chest. He knew better than to trust anything this creature said, but the offer lingered in the air like a poisonous temptation. Power. A way to destroy the darkness that plagued the valley once and for all. But at what cost? What's the catch? Kamau asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature smiled again, the corners of its mouth stretching unnaturally wide. There is always a price, Kamau. To set me free, you must become my vessel. My power will flow through you, but you will no longer be just yourself. You will be something more. Something unstoppable. Kamau clenched his fists, his mind reeling. He had come this far, faced horrors he could never have imagined. But this was a choice that would change everything. Was he willing to sacrifice his own humanity for the sake of victory? I won't let you control me, Kamau said firmly, though his voice wavered. I won't be a puppet. The creature's laugh was hollow, like the echo of bones rattling in an empty grave. You misunderstand, Kamau. This is not about control. This is about survival. The city will not stop until it consumes everything. Without me, you have no hope. Kamau hesitated, his thoughts spiraling. The flame in his hand flickered again, almost going out. He felt the coldness of the room creeping into his bones, the weight of the decision crushing him. I will not be your vessel, Kamau finally said, his voice trembling but resolute. The creature's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, its expression darkened. Then you will die here, alone and forgotten. Suddenly, the chains around the creature began to tighten, the metal groaning as the creature struggled against its bonds. The entire room shook, dust falling from the ceiling, and Kamau took a step back, clutching the flame as it dimmed further. You cannot stop the darkness, the creature roared, its voice a booming thunder. You are nothing without me. Kamau turned and ran, the sound of the creature's furious howls echoing in his ears. He dashed through the door and into the streets, the air thick with the stench of decay. His pulse raced, and the whispers of the city grew louder, more frantic. But he couldn't stop now. He knew the creature was right about one thing, the city wouldn't let him leave so easily. Kamau's lungs burned as he sprinted through the twisted streets, the darkened buildings looming above him like silent predators. The air was heavy, thick with the weight of unseen eyes watching his every move. The flame in his hand flickered weakly, barely more than a spark now. As he ran, the whispers followed him, growing louder, more insistent. They wrapped around his thoughts like vines, squeezing tighter with each step. His mind raced with questions. Was he really strong enough to face the darkness without the creature's power? Could he survive without making the ultimate sacrifice? Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his chest, and Kamau stumbled, gasping for air. He collapsed against a nearby wall, clutching at his heart. It felt as though something was clawing its way inside him, tearing at his very soul. The whispers turned to laughter, cold and mocking. You think you can escape? A voice hissed, the same voice from the creature in the chamber. You already carry the darkness within you. Kamau's vision blurred, and he fell to his knees. The flame in his hand flickered out completely, plunging him into darkness. He could feel the coldness creeping over him, seeping into his veins, filling every corner of his being. No, no. Kamau shouted, his voice hoarse. He clutched at his chest, trying to force the darkness away. But it was too late. It had already taken root, buried deep within him. He could feel it now, an overwhelming presence inside him, whispering dark promises, urging him to give in. The creature's power was still with him, even though he had refused its offer. You cannot outrun your fate, Kamau, the voice whispered in his mind. You are already mine. Kamau's hands trembled as he fought against the pull of the darkness. He had to stay strong, had to resist. But the longer he fought, the weaker he became. Suddenly, the ground beneath him rumbled, and the shadows around him began to twist and writhe. From the darkness, shapes emerged, figures cloaked in shadow, their eyes glowing with an eerie light. They moved silently, their bodies shifting like smoke as they circled Kamau. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. The darkness had already taken hold, rooting him to the ground. The shadow figures closed in, their whispers filling his mind, drowning out all other thoughts. Kamau clenched his fists, fighting back tears of frustration. He couldn't let it end like this. Not now. Not after everything he had been through. With a sudden burst of determination, Kamau reached deep inside himself, searching for the last remnants of light. It was faint, barely a flicker, but it was there, buried beneath the layers of darkness. He focused on that light, drawing it out, letting it grow. Slowly, the warmth began to return, pushing back against the cold. The whispers in his mind faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. The shadow figures hesitated, their movements faltering as the light grew stronger. Kamau pushed himself to his feet, the flame reigniting in his hand. The figures shrank back, their glowing eyes narrowing. Kamau took a deep breath, steadying himself. He wasn't done yet. He raised the flame high, and the shadows scattered, dissolving into the night. But Kamau knew this was only the beginning. The darkness was inside him now, a constant presence lurking just beneath the surface. He could fight it, but it would never truly be gone. And deep down, he knew that the creature in the chamber was waiting for the moment when Kamau's resolve would falter. Waiting for him to give in. With the darkness inside Kamau whispering to him and tempting him with power, will he give in? Join us on our final episode to find out.